Hello and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Julie Doyle. The Treasurer, Wayne Swan, says it's a remarkable outcome. The national accounts show the economy grew by 1% in the September quarter, but the opposition says the government's not making the most of the solid growth. Joining me today to discuss this and other events, we have Labor MP Michael Danby in Melbourne and Coalition MP Theresa Gambaro in Brisbane. Good afternoon to you both.
Buonasera,
Good afternoon,
Theresa,
Julie.
and buonasera.
Now, before we get started today, let's have a listen to some of that press conference from Wayne Swan.
Now, despite all of this European turmoil and deteriorating world growth, our economy grew by a standout 1% in the last quarter. This is a resounding vote of confidence in our economy, and it's a tribute to our underlying strength and resilience amid very shaky global conditions.
Wayne Swan there. Now, Theresa Gambaro, they're pretty good figures, aren't they, for the government?
Well, I think they could be better. I mean, despite the fact that we've had some growth there, the government's managed to rack up $26 billion in the last 6 months. It's a government of excessive spending, borrowing and debt, and clearly those growth figures could have been better if we had a responsible fiscal government.
But Wayne Swan's right, isn't he, though, when he compares these figures and the economy we have here with the situation elsewhere that we're seeing in Europe? Australia is doing pretty well.
Well, clearly, domestically, the government's running up enormous debts. And the industry that is doing the best, which did deliver the highest growth, 50% of the capital investment was in the mining industry. So what do? They tax it with a mining resource tax. So I just can't understand this government's economic management.
But our debt compared to other countries, though, it's nothing. It's not even in the same league.
Well, do you compare yourself to the worst? I mean, you try and have a fiscally... We left this government with a $20 billion surplus. At the moment, it's borrowing $100 million a day, and it has a debt amount of $106 billion. I mean, these are not very encouraging debt figures. In fact, the growth could have been better if we had a more responsible fiscal government.
Michael Danby, I'll bring you into this. Could the growth have been better? Should the government be doing more?
Well, I don't think we should be talking Australia down. Australia has around 5% unemployment. As the Treasurer said, 1% economic growth ahead of any developed country. This country is the envy of the industrialised world, and all of the opposition can do is rabbit on about money that was borrowed to keep this country in top shape during the global financial crisis. I'm sure all of the opposition MPs went to the opening of every school classroom in their electorate, as they should have. But it's a bit hypocritical to complain about debt when they won't tell us a single program that they're going to cut.
Well, Wayne Swan in that press conference today used phrases such as, this is remarkable, it's an exceptional result. Is he being a bit too confident, though, given the risks that are on the horizon?
I don't think he's being too confident. I think the government's mini-budget showed that they're very conscious of the fact that the European crisis could possibly loom across the horizon and threaten the prosperity of Australia. But I think he has reason for saying to the Australian public, this is a standout economy and the government has an important role in making Australia perform in the way it is.
Well, just having a look at another economic issue, and that's interest rates. Now, we've seen, as we go to air, we haven't heard from the banks yet as to what they're going to do, if they will pass on that interest rate cut. Michael Danby, there's not much the government can do, though, is there, to force them to do that?
Well, the Bank of Queensland and Members Equity Bank have passed on the full cut, but we need to really put the pressure, moral pressure, on the banks to do the right thing.
But that's it, though. Frankly, just moral pressure. That's all you can do, though. You can't.
Well, I mean, I've known Tony Abbott since we were in student politics together, and he was a Santa Maria supporter before he was a liberal. Are we really going back to the regulation of the banks? I mean, 20 years ago, we decided all of that when Paul Keating made this into a proper market economy by deregulating the banks. The only alternative is the Santa Maria solution, and maybe I can ask Theresa, is Tony tempted by that?
I think you're overstating this. I think the Treasurer can do a hell of a lot more. The reason interest rates are so high is the excessive borrowing and spending by this government, and we've seen every program that's been rolled out has been a disaster, from pink bats to school halls, and you proudly showcase that, but there's been absolute economic waste and mismanagement in all of those programs. And just recently they couldn't even get a tender right for the ABC Sky tender.
But just getting back to these interest rates need to be... Just getting back to the issue about banks. These interest rates need to be passed on by the banks, particularly small business needs to have these interest rates at a time of high borrowing costs and households. So with that I agree with you, but I think more can be done. You have a government here that's asking the Australian public and households to rein in their spending, and yet they're not doing the same thing.
I'll be fair, Teresa. We just cut in the mini budget billions of dollars out of programs. Give us some credit for that. Go on.
Well, you went out and excessively spent it in the first place, Michael, and you're trimming. You had a crisis mini budget, but you could have done a lot more in being more economically responsible.
Well, let's move on from this one.
Pressure on interest rates.
Let's move on to another topic now. We'll leave that one where you are. And the Catholic priest and the youth worker, Father Chris Riley, has appeared on a pamphlet from the clubs industry opposing the government's gambling reforms, saying that mandatory pre-commitment is not the right way to go. And that's upset the independent MP, Andrew Wilkie.
I have a lot of time for Father Riley, but in this instance, he is being paid by the poker machine industry and he's being played by the poker machine industry. And it is astounding that the poker machine industry has now stooped this low.
Michael Danby, to you first. What do you make of this intervention into the debate by Father Riley?
Well, it's a bit odd, a charity worker who's renowned for his good work with young people, seeming to say it's okay to leave older people who've got gambling addictions to their own devices. I just think that the gambling industry, the casinos are all playing this very hard ball, and we need some rational resolution of this issue. But I think all of the other leading charitable workers, such as Tim Costello, have over the years shown the desperate need of people who are suffering from gambling addictions, and we shouldn't be pawns of the casino industry.
He's well respected though, so does it damage your cause here?
I don't think so. I think people will see it as a little bit sad.
Teresa, what do you make of this intervention?
I have a lot of respect for Father Riley. He's been doing this for 20 years. The point he made is that more education and counselling is needed. And if you're going to tackle gambling, why not online gambling? And you mentioned Reverend Costello, Michael. I mean, he's always going on about how you can lose your home in the comfort of your own, your own lounge room. Online gambling is a big problem out there. Why not horse race, the racing industry? I mean, I've worked in environments, there's no question that there are problem gamblers, and I've worked in work environments where I've seen it firsthand, but we've got a discussion paper out there. We think there's a better way to do it through education and counselling, not this approach to appease Mr Wilkie, and all that's about is to appease Mr Wilkie.
When it comes
it doesn't
to this
have any
issue,
logic
though,
to it.
When it comes to this one, Father Riley is a youth worker. He deals with young people. He doesn't necessarily deal with problem gamblers. Other experts who deal with problem gamblers are saying he's wrong.
Well, he deals with families that have been affected by problem gambling, that have been affected by other social issues. So I think he's worked in this sector for 20 years. He's seen firsthand the effect that it has on families.
Just looking at
and he advocates what the coalition does, and that's why we have a discussion paper on this at the moment that we've put out to the industry. We need to look at education and counselling. Giving someone a pre-commitment limit is not going to solve this problem. They'll just put a higher limit on this pre-commitment.
Well, let's just move on to another topic. We've got a lot to get through today. And Michael, looking at still some of the fallout from the ALP conference, do you think the party went far enough when it comes to the reforms and the changes with giving more empowerment to grassroots members? Would you have liked to have seen a greater adoption of those changes there?
Well, the Prime Minister had wins on an experiment with primaries. She had a win on sale of uranium under strict negotiated conditions to India, and she had a win on the conscience vote. So it was a good conference for the Prime Minister. But on party democracy, I think The primaries is a good idea, just to give them a bit of an experiment. I wouldn't go overboard about them. I think the real problem has grown out of the fact that in New South Wales there have either been complete rank and file pre-selections or M40s. That's where the state office decides the whole thing. The Victorian example, where you have 50% grassroots party members and 50% head office decide things, would seem to me to be a more democratic way of getting good people into Parliament. And I'd point out to you that we got Bill Shorten, Richard Marles, David Feeney and Mark Dreyfus in under that system under the last round of pre-selection. So I just think being consistent and giving members a say, particularly in choosing who will be their federal representatives, is the way to go with party democracy.
Yeah, I'll just bring Teresa in here, though. This is an issue for all parties about getting more grassroots involvement. What do you see as the challenges for the coalition in doing this?
Look, we've had major reforms. We had a reform done by Peter Reith that was very open and transparent, and the whole report was released, not like the Labor Party report by Carr, Bracks and Faulkner, where selective bits were released. If you're going to be totally transparent, release the whole report. You've got a leadership crisis in the Labor Party. You've got faceless men leaking on Julia Gillard. You've got faceless men leaking on Mr. Rudd. Look, Michael, you know as well as anyone that you've taken it to a new art form in the Labor Party. Not only you're stabbing each other in the chest, not the back anymore.
Well, I just want to get to one more thing with Michael.
They're a party in deep disarray.
I just want to get to one more thing, Michael. In the conference, one of the last sessions was foreign policy, and we saw Kevin Rudd talking up his achievements there as foreign minister. When it comes to Julia Gillard, though, we know foreign policy is not her passion. How do you think she's performing in this area?
Well, she's taking an increasingly assertive role. This treaty potentially with India, that's a very important development. The overall visit of the President of the United States and the upgrading of the Marines' presence in Darwin, her visit to Japan and South Korea. I can't tell you how strongly the Japanese and South Korean foreign ministers have commended those views. So it may not have been the top of her agenda when she became Prime Minister. It wasn't John Howard's either, remember, but Prime Ministers grow into these things, and I have full confidence in her.
What about when it comes to issues in dealing, for example, with Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Well, this is a developing issue. Pakistan is the source of a lot of the explosives that kill Australian soldiers with those improvised explosive devices. And if there is another one that kills an Australian soldier, and we discover that the Pakistanis are the source of where this ammonium nitrate comes from, I tell you what, I'll be calling for Australia to reduce its aid and to send the Pakistani High Commissioner on a holiday. It's outrageous that a country that's getting foreign aid from Australia is allowing its explosive factories to be used by the Taliban. That's all we have time for, I'm afraid,
there, Michael. We'll have to cut it off there. Thank you both for joining us, and thanks for watching Capitol Hill today. We'll be back again at the same time tomorrow.